They are already doing it. Right now. In your relationships. In your workplace. In conversations you replay at night, wondering why you felt so small after talking to someone who, on the surface, seemed perfectly reasonable. They are doing it, and most of the time you don't even have the language to describe what happened. You just know something felt wrong. You just know you agreed to something you didn't want to agree to. You just know you walked away feeling like you lost something you never consciously chose to give. That feeling has a name. And once you can name it, they lose most of their power over you forever. Manipulation is not what movies made it look like. It is not a villain in a dark room plotting your destruction. It is not always loud. It is not always cruel. In fact, the most effective manipulation is almost indistinguishable from kindness, from concern, from love. That is precisely what makes it so dangerous. The person who guilt trips you into staying when you need to leave is not screaming at you. They are crying softly and asking how you could possibly abandon them after everything they have been through. The person who controls your decisions through approval is not threatening you. They are simply warm when you comply and subtly cold when you don't, and you have trained yourself over months or years to do whatever keeps the warmth available. The person who dismantles your confidence is not insulting you directly. They are asking questions, gentle, reasonable questions. Are you sure about that? Don't you think that's a little ambitious? I just worry about you sometimes. None of these people are wearing a sign. And that is the first thing you need to understand about becoming immune to manipulation. The threat almost never announces itself. Epictetus taught something that sounds almost too simple until you sit with it long enough for it to become uncomfortable. He said that the single greatest source of human suffering is the confusion between what is inside your control and what is not. And manipulation, at its core, is a technology designed to blur exactly that line. The manipulator's entire strategy depends on making you feel responsible for things that are not your responsibility, making you feel guilty for boundaries that are not violations, making you feel afraid of consequences that are either exaggerated or entirely fabricated, making you feel that your own perception of reality cannot be trusted. Once they have achieved that confusion, you are not being controlled by them. You are being controlled by your own disorientation. And that is why simply recognizing manipulation from the outside is not enough. You can read every book on narcissism and emotional abuse ever written, and still find yourself standing in the middle of a manipulative dynamic with no idea how you got there. Because immunity to manipulation is not an intellectual achievement. It is a structural one. It requires rebuilding the internal architecture that manipulation targets in the first place. The first structure you need to rebuild is your relationship with discomfort. Manipulation works because human beings are wired to resolve discomfort as quickly as possible. Tension is unpleasant. Conflict is costly. Disapproval feels threatening in a way that goes far deeper than the rational mind. And the manipulator knows this. They don't need to force you into anything. They just need to create enough discomfort around the option they don't want you to choose, and enough relief around the option they do want you to choose, and your own nervous system will do the rest of the work. The Stoic response to this is radical and requires genuine practice. You must learn to sit inside discomfort without immediately moving to resolve it. When someone is unhappy with you, you must be able to tolerate that unhappiness without it becoming an emergency that overrides your judgment. When someone withdraws warmth as a punishment for your autonomy, you must be able to observe that withdrawal with clarity rather than panic. When someone creates tension through silence, through sighing, through the particular weight of their disappointment, you must be able to remain present in that tension without automatically reaching for whatever will dissolve it. This is not cruelty. This is not indifference. This is the foundation of every boundary that actually holds. Because a boundary that collapses the moment someone expresses displeasure is not a boundary. It is a suggestion. The second structure is what Marcus Aurelius called returning to your own judgment. One of the most sophisticated manipulation tactics that exists is the slow, methodical erosion of your confidence in your own perception. It happens gradually, over time, through a pattern of being told that you misremember, that you overreact, that you are too sensitive, that you misunderstood, that what you clearly experienced didn't happen the way you think it happened. Individually, each instance seems small, arguable. Maybe they are right. Maybe you did misread the situation. But the cumulative effect of this pattern is devastating. You stop trusting yourself. You start running every perception through the filter of whether this other person would validate it. You begin to doubt the evidence of your own experience. You become dependent on external confirmation for things that should never require external confirmation. And once that happens, you are not just vulnerable to this one person's manipulation. You are vulnerable to anyone who figures out that your internal compass has been compromised. The Stoic practice here is brutally simple and brutally difficult. You return to your own judgment, repeatedly, deliberately, even when it is uncomfortable, even when someone is pressuring you to revise it. You ask yourself, what did I actually observe? Not what were they trying to convince me I observed. What did I actually see, hear, feel in my body? And you hold that. Not rigidly, not arrogantly. You remain genuinely open to being wrong. But you place the burden of proof where it belongs, on the person asking you to override your own experience. The third structure is the elimination of the need for their approval. This one cuts deepest, because it requires the most honesty. Most manipulation does not work on people who genuinely do not need the approval of the person manipulating them. Think about that carefully. The colleague who manipulates through subtle social exclusion has no leverage over someone who is not invested in being included in that particular circle. The partner who manipulates through the withdrawal of affection has no leverage over someone who has cultivated a relationship with their own sense of worth that does not depend on continuous external reinforcement. The authority figure who manipulates through implied disapproval has no leverage over someone who has done the internal work of separating their value as a human being from the verdict of any single person. Seneca wrote that the man who needs nothing from the world cannot be threatened by the world. He was not describing detachment as indifference to life. He was describing a specific kind of internal sufficiency, a relationship with your own values, your own judgment, your own sense of who you are, that is stable enough to withstand pressure from the outside without fracturing. This is built over time, through deliberate practice, through choosing your own judgment in small moments so that when the large moments arrive, the muscle is already there. The fourth structure is learning to recognize the patterns before the trap is fully set. Manipulation follows patterns, and once you know the patterns, something changes permanently in how you process certain interactions. There is the pattern of manufactured urgency. You must decide now. There is no time to think. If you don't act immediately, the window closes. This pattern is designed to bypass your judgment by making deliberation feel like a liability. The Stoic response: any decision that cannot survive 24 hours of reflection does not deserve to be made under pressure. If the window closes while you are thinking clearly, it was not a window worth climbing through. There is the pattern of the moving target. The rules keep changing. The standard keeps shifting. No matter what you do, it is never quite right. You find yourself in a permanent state of trying to reach a bar that is being quietly raised every time you get close. The Stoic response: recognize that a standard designed to be unachievable is not a standard. It is a mechanism of control, and your job is not to reach it. Your job is to name it for what it is and decide whether this dynamic is worth your continued presence. There is the pattern of the false dilemma. You either do this or you don't care about me. You are either with me or against me. There are no other options. This pattern is designed to eliminate your ability to negotiate reality by reducing a complex situation to two options, both of which serve the manipulator's agenda. The Stoic response: whenever someone reduces a complex situation to exactly two choices, your first question should always be who benefits from these being the only options. The fifth structure is the most counterintuitive one. Becoming immune to manipulation does not require becoming harder. It requires becoming clearer. The hardness that most people develop as a defense against manipulation is actually a liability, because hardness is rigid, and rigid things break under sustained pressure. Hardness also closes off genuine connection. genuine warmth, genuine openness, to being affected by the people who deserve to affect you. What the Stoics were building was not armor. It was clarity. The clarity to know your own values so precisely that any request which violates them is immediately visible as such. The clarity to feel the pull of manipulation without being carried by it, to observe the discomfort, the guilt, the fear, and to recognize them as signals worth examining rather than emergencies requiring immediate action. The clarity to be fully present in a relationship, fully warm, fully open to genuine influence, and simultaneously completely unavailable to the particular kind of influence that requires you to betray yourself to comply. That is not hardness. That is precision. And precision cannot be manipulated, because precision sees exactly what is happening. It calls the thing by its name, internally if not externally. It knows the difference between someone genuinely expressing a need and someone engineering a response. It knows the difference between a reasonable request and a test of compliance designed to establish precedent. And once you see that difference with consistency, the leverage disappears. Not because the manipulator stopped trying, but because you stopped being the kind of person their tools were designed for. This is what immunity to manipulation actually looks like. It is not the dramatic confrontation. It is not the public unmasking. It is not the perfectly worded monologue that makes them realize what they have been doing. It is quieter than that. It is the moment you feel the pull and pause. It is the moment you recognize the pattern and choose not to follow its logic to the conclusion it was designed to reach. It is the moment you tolerate the discomfort of someone's displeasure without letting that discomfort make decisions on your behalf. It is the moment you return to your own judgment and hold it even when holding it is uncomfortable. Repeated 10,000 times across the ordinary moments of an ordinary life, until it becomes not a technique but a nature, until you are simply the kind of person that manipulation cannot find a foothold in. Not because you are suspicious of everyone, not because you have closed yourself off from genuine human connection, but because you know exactly who you are. And that knowledge is the one thing no manipulation in the world was ever designed to survive. If you have been here before, if you have replayed conversations at night, trying to understand why you felt so diminished after talking to someone who never raised their voice, this channel was built for you. Subscribe if you are serious about building the internal architecture that makes you genuinely unreachable. If you are comfortable continuing to hand your piece to anyone sophisticated enough to find the right lever, the door is open. But if you are done being someone else's instrument, you already know what to do.